The Big Bang Theory once made brilliant minds feel like they finally had a place to belong. Just a small apartment, a narrow hallway, and a few awkward people trying to decode the universe while still unable to fully understand themselves. And maybe that is exactly why looking back today hurts even more. Because while the laughter on screen has barely changed, the people behind it have lived through fame loss, private battles, and even goodbyes that could not be held on to. This is The Big Bang Theory then and now in 2026, where the story behind the laughter may touch you more deeply than you expect. Number 1. Kaley Cuoco as Penny. Penny arrived in Pasadena like sunlight breaking through a window, bringing with her a kind of everyday brightness that the apartment full of formulas, laws, and awkward egos across the hallway had never known. She was sharp, instinctive, quick-witted, and most importantly, never intimidated by the intellectual world of her neighbors. Kaley Cuoco was only 22 years old when she took the role in 2007. But what made her performance so important was that Penny was never just the normal person standing among geniuses. She was the emotional translator of the entire series, the bridge between brilliant intelligence and the deeply human needs that the other characters often did not even know how to name. Penny's humor was not just reactionary, it was also a form of survival. She could tease challenge and then soften the entire atmosphere within the same beat through razor-sharp timing, expressive eyes, and a warmth that always arrived at exactly the right moment. Over time, Penny grew from a young woman chasing an acting career into a woman learning how to stand firmly in a life that did not unfold according to her original dream. That is what made her journey resonate with audiences, not only because it was beautiful, but because it was real. In 2026, Kaley Cuoco is 41 years old, and watching Penny again now feels like revisiting the gentle heart of The Big Bang Theory. Proof that it was her warmth that transformed a sitcom about geniuses into a story that knew how to love. Number 2. Kunal Nayyar as Raj Koothrappali. Raj Koothrappali was gentleness wrapped in insecurity, a brilliant mind with a romantic heart who never truly knew how to protect himself from the world. Kunal Nayyar was only 26 years old when he began the role in 2007, and what made his performance so important was that he made vulnerability funny without ever making it feel cheap. Raj's selective mutism was not just a comedic detail. It felt like the physical shape of social fear, of the longing to reach other people so intensely that even speech itself became a wall. Nayyar gave Raj charm sensitivity, both polish and emotional openness, qualities rarely granted to men in sitcoms, while still allowing them to keep their dignity. Over time, Raj became the quietest ache in the series, the one who longed for love the deepest, yet also stood closest to heartbreak most often. Nayyar's skill was in how he could deliver a joke and then let the silence afterward speak for the loneliness on its own. By 2026, Kunal Nayyar is 45 years old, and watching Raj again now feels like looking back at a portrait of modern longing, intelligent, gentle, and still searching without ever truly stopping. Number 3. Johnny Galecki as Leonard Hofstadter. Leonard Hofstadter was the emotional center of the show, beneath the surface of a considerate man, as if he was always walking more gently than everyone else, to keep the world around him from breaking apart too violently. Johnny Galecki was 32 years old when he began the role in 2007, and what made his performance so important was that Leonard served a function no one else could replace. He was the bridge between Sheldon and Penny, between genius and ordinary life, between friendship and disappointment. Leonard was not the loudest person in the room, but he was often the most human one, carrying the need to be loved, to feel stable, to belong somewhere, while still quietly colliding with childhood wounds and insecurities that never truly disappeared. Galecki played Leonard with sad eyes, humor filled with hurt, and a deeply human kind of patience, the kind that made every line feel as though there was a layer of gentle exhaustion behind it. The relationship between Leonard and Penny became the backbone of the series, not because it was perfect, but because it was earned, because it was the story of two people learning how to move toward each other without losing themselves in the process. In 2026, Johnny Galecki is 51 years old, and Leonard remains a quiet reminder that the most heroic role in a sitcom is sometimes simply the person who keeps the entire family standing when everyone else is beginning to fall apart. Number 4. Jim Parsons as Sheldon Cooper. Sheldon Cooper was the engine of the entire show, precise, disciplined, possessing an intellect so sharp that it sometimes hurt even the people standing closest to him, without him realizing it himself. Jim Parsons was 34 years old when he began the role in 2007, and what made his performance important was that he turned a character who could very easily have become irritating into someone lovable without sanding away the rough edges. Sheldon's humor did not lie only in his quirky habits, but also in the structure, the rhythm, the repetition, the almost obsessive precision, and the raw truth of a man who did not understand emotions, yet kept colliding with them. Parsons played the role as if he were performing a piece of music with its own rhythm, where every line, every glance, every pause was controlled to an almost absolute degree. Over time, Sheldon evolved in a way rarely seen in sitcoms. Friendship taught him language, love taught him patience, and life taught him that intelligence alone was not enough to live among people. Jim Parsons conveyed that transformation through very small, subtle, and deeply disciplined movements. In 2026, Jim Parsons is 53 years old, and Sheldon still remains one of television's most unforgettable portraits of slow but genuine change. Number 5. Kevin Sussman as Stuart Bloom. Stuart Bloom was the quiet ache, hidden inside a joke, the comic book store owner who always seemed one step behind life, but never stopped showing up as if simply remaining there meant he had not completely lost yet. Kevin Sussman, born on December 4, 1970, was 39 years old when he first appeared in 2009. And what made his performance so important was that Stuart made the world outside the main apartment feel more real. He was not a standout genius, nor the center of a great romance. He was simply a man trying to hold on to his job, trying to be accepted, and trying to belong somewhere. Sussman played Stuart with an awkwardness that felt deeply human, desperate without becoming pitiful, lonely without ever turning into a cheap punchline. It was that restraint that made every joke about Stuart carry a small scratch from real life beneath it. Over time, Stuart evolved from the image of a recurring, pathetic guy into a genuine friend, and gradually into someone finally allowed to touch a little happiness of his own. In 2026, Kevin Sussman is 56 years old, and watching Stuart again now feels like a gentle reminder that in comedy, the people who never stop trying are often the ones who reach the audience's hearts the deepest. Number 6. John Ross Bowie as Barry Kripke. Barry Kripke is confidence weaponized, loud, smug, and always arriving at exactly the right moment to poke at Sheldon's weak spots, as if it were a sport he especially loved. John Ross Bowie, born on May 30, 1971, was 38 years old when he first began appearing in 2009, and what made his performance matter was that Kripke was never a villain in the usual sense. He was the embodiment of competition, of ego, of the very real irritation that exists in academic environments where brilliant minds do not always come with generosity. Bowie understood that secret perfectly. He played Kripke as if the character truly believed he was the hero of his own story, and it was that absolute confidence that made every taunt spark. Kripke did not simply disrupt the atmosphere. He forced Sheldon and the others to confront something. Intelligence does not easily solve ego pettiness and the collision between highly capable people who are not pleasant to be around. Bowie's comedic rhythm was sharp, tight, and carefully calculated, making even his shortest appearances instantly memorable. By 2026, John Ross Bowie is 55 years old, and Kripke still feels like the sharp seasoning that proves a sitcom world is only truly complete when someone walks in determined to make everything more uncomfortable on purpose. Number 7. Mayim Bialik as Amy Farrah Fowler. Amy Farrah, Fowl, entered the series like a mirror reflecting Sheldon, intelligent, rigid, socially awkward, and quietly lonely, as if she had spent so long living in the world of intellect that she had forgotten the path into other people's hearts. Mayim Bialik, born on December 12, 1975, was already 35 years old when she first appeared in 2010. And what made her performance so important was that Amy expanded the emotional range of the entire show. What began as intellectual similarity gradually became one of the slowest and most satisfying emotional journeys on television. Amy did not only learn how to love, she also learned how to make friends, learn intimacy, and learn how to belong without betraying herself. Bialik played the role through awkward silences, excessively precise word choices, and deeply genuine moments where the need to belong suddenly surfaced. It was Amy who helped the series move beyond being a story about eccentric men and become a story about human beings learning how to connect. In 2026, Mayim Bialik is 51 years old, and watching Amy again now feels like seeing the clearest form of emotional courage in the world of sitcoms. Number 8. Laura Spencer as Emily Sweeney. Emily Sweeney brought a darker, sharper tone into Raj's love life. Intelligent, dry-witted, and completely unshaken by the group's strange habits, as if she entered that world not to adapt to it, but to look directly at it. Laura Spencer, born on May 8, 1986, was only 28 years old when she joined the series in 2014. And what made her performance important was that Emily was never written as a predictable, perfect girlfriend. She was a fully grown adult, with her own presence, sometimes blunt, sometimes amused, sometimes making others uncomfortable because of her fascination with creepy things. That contrast was exactly what gave Raj a relationship that did not treat him like a fragile joke, but like a man who had to learn how to face the reality of love. Laura Spencer played Emily with an edge that always carried warmth underneath, making the relationship feel both believable and not entirely comfortable. And that discomfort was precisely what gave it value, because Emily forced Raj to leave behind imagined romance and finally touch something real. In 2026, Laura Spencer is 40 years old, and looking back at Emily now feels like looking back at the sincere effort of the later seasons to help Raj grow emotionally. Number 9. Wil Wheaton as a fictionalized version of himself. The fictionalized version of Wil Wheaton in the show was one of the smartest meta-jokes of the series at once. A celebrity guest star, a longtime rival, and eventually a friend, in a way nobody expected. Wil Wheaton, born on July 29, 1972, was 37 years old when he first appeared in 2009. And what made his performance important was that he gave Sheldon an opponent from outside the world of science. Someone who could hurt him, not through logic, but through social games and deeply human cunning. Wheaton played himself with charming self-mockery, making the character both petty and charismatic irritating, yet hard to dislike. And over time, he quietly blended into the show's circle of friends, like a natural extension of it. That presence did not just expand the fandom and pop culture world of The Big Bang Theory. It also reflected a very adult truth. Grudges can fade. People can change. And the person who once hurt you may one day become your companion. In 2026, Wil Wheaton is 54 years old, and revisiting his appearances now still feels like proof of the show's joyful confidence in knowing how to laugh at itself. Number 10. Carol Ann Susi as Debbie Wolowitz. Debbie Wolowitz was never seen on screen, yet she was everywhere. A booming voice echoing from behind a door, an invisible force shaping almost every part of Howard's personality, from his frustration and dependence to the warped form of love he was never truly able to escape. Carol Ann Susi, born on February 2, 1952, began voicing the character in 2007. And what made the role so remarkable was how she turned a woman who never physically appeared into such a vivid presence that audiences could feel as if she were right there inside the house. Debbie's humor did not come only from the volume of her voice, but from the rhythm, the absurd level of specificity in every demand, and the way Howard immediately shrank into himself like a son who had never fully grown up. But over time, that voice became more than just a joke. It became the sound of family history of love, suffocation, exhaustion, and an attachment that could never truly be broken. Carol Ann Susi passed away on November 11th, 2014, at the age of 62 after a short battle with cancer, and the show said goodbye to her with a very real sense of grief. Looking back now, that voice feels like a time capsule, both funny and heartbreaking at the same time. The thing that turned an invisible character into someone immortal. Number 11. Brian George as Dr. Koothrappali. Dr. Koothrappali brought a different kind of pressure into Raj's world, the voice of tradition, of family expectations, and of a love that always came with judgment, as if even affection had to be controlled and kept within the proper boundaries. Brian George, born on July 1, 1952, was 55 years old when he first appeared in 2007. And what made his performance so important was that this character gave Raj's story a very real layer of depth. Raj's insecurity was not just an odd personality trait played for laughs. It was also the product of a life wrapped in privilege, shaped by expectation, and constantly managed according to standards that had already been decided long before him. Brian George played that father with authority and a very restrained sense of humor, making him arrogant without turning him into a one-dimensional, cruel man. It was those scenes with him that expanded Raj into someone struggling with the most fundamental question of adulthood: how to be yourself while still belonging to the family you were born into. In 2026, Brian George is 74 years old, and watching this character again now feels like a quiet reminder that growing up sometimes does not begin with love, but with learning how to negotiate with family without losing yourself. Number 12. Brian Posehn as Bert Kibbler. Bert Kibbler is the sweetest kind of outsider. Awkward, quietly lonely, and so sincere that he becomes funny in the gentlest possible way, as if he had grown used to standing a little too far from the light, while still hoping that one day someone would turn back and wave him in. Brian Posehn, born on July 6, 1966, was already 47 years old when he first appeared in 2013. And what made his performance memorable was the way Bert reminded audiences that even within a group of nerds, there are still different levels of belonging. Posehn played Bert with a very soft humility, allowing the character to be overlooked without ever turning him into a cruel joke. The awkward crushes, the clumsy attempts at friendship, and the few rare moments of confidence always made Bert feel like the person standing at the edge of the circle, waiting for someone to save him a seat. And as the group slowly began making room for Bert, the show itself became warmer too. The humor here did not come from humiliation, but from late acceptance, from the small joy of finally seeing a kind person being noticed at last. By 2026, Brian Posehn is 60 years old, and watching Bert again now feels like a quiet lesson that the kindest person in the room is often the one who gets forgotten the longest. Number 13. The Big Bang Theory. Laurie Metcalf as Mary Cooper. Mary Cooper entered the series like a comfort from another world, faith, southern warmth, and a maternal love, strong enough to stand beside an impossible mind, like Sheldon's, without ever being overshadowed. Laurie Metcalf, born on June 16, 1955, was 52 years old when she first appeared in 2007. And what made this role so important was that Mary gave Sheldon roots. She was not intimidated by genius, nor was she persuaded by complicated arguments. What mattered to her first and foremost was still kindness. Metcalf played Mary with a very beautiful balance, humorous without being over-the-top serious, without being cold respectful of faith, without turning it into a joke, steadfast yet never cruel. Every line she delivered carried the feeling of a woman who had lived through enough to know when to be gentle and when to stand firm. The scenes with Mary helped viewers understand that Sheldon's eccentricity did not appear out of nowhere. It was nurtured within a family that loved him in their own way. Because of that, Mary added an extremely important layer of emotional warmth to the series. In 2026, Laurie Metcalf is 71 years old, and Mary remains one of the gentlest yet strongest sources of authority in the entire series. Number 14. Christine Baranski as Dr. Beverly Hofstadter. Beverly Hofstadter is intelligence without warmth, a clinical brilliance paired with emotional distance, so sharp it leaves scars, as if she could read people through logic while still missing the deepest pain inside them. Christine Baranski, born on May 2, 1952, was 57 years old when she first appeared in 2009. And what made this role so important was that Beverly made the source of Leonard's insecurity visible. This was a childhood shaped by analysis instead of affection, where love was replaced by observation and approval always felt like a test that never truly ended. Baranski played Beverly with remarkable, elegant precision. Every line felt carefully measured beforehand, every reaction tightly restrained, making the character both funny and chilling at the same time. But that coldness was not there only for comedy. It explained Leonard himself, his need for approval, his habit of pleasing others, and the quiet fear that he had never truly been good enough. And Baranski's talent was in still allowing Beverly to have rare cracks moments where jealousy, regret, or a small glimpse of the real person quietly emerged. In 2026, Christine Baranski is 74 years old, and Beverly remains one of the most delicate portrayals of family trauma ever told through humor that is cold and sharp like a surgical blade. Number 15. Joshua Malina as President Siebert. President Siebert brought bureaucratic realism into a world of geniuses, a kind of authority that was always smiling, organizational pressure wrapped in a polite tone, and the quiet reminder that no matter how brilliant someone is, everyone eventually has to answer to some kind of system. Joshua Malina, born on January 17, 1966, was already 45 years old when he first appeared in 2011. And what made the role important was that Siebert made Caltech feel like a real workplace, instead of just a sitcom stage. In scenes with him, science collided with budgets, public image deadlines, and the kind of internal politics that no extraordinary mind could ever completely stay outside of. Malina played the character with dry wit and a very calm rhythm, making authority feel alive instead of heavy. Siebert was not a villain. He was the system in human form, sometimes supportive, sometimes frustrating, but always there to force the geniuses to face reality. That was what made the world of the show feel more mature. In 2026, Joshua Malina is 60 years old, and Siebert remains the Big Bang Theory's very adult acknowledgement that genius in the end still has to live inside structures that demand compromise. Number 16. Brian Thomas Smith as Zach Johnson. Zach Johnson is the charmingly ordinary guy who walks into the world of scientists like a golden retriever, wandering into a chess tournament, friendly, confused, and strangely lovable, to the point that his mere presence exposes just how severely awkward the brilliant people around him really are. Brian Thomas Smith, born on May 13, 1977, was 33 years old when he first appeared in 2010. And what made the role important was that Zach provided contrast without any cruelty attached to it. He was not stupid as an insult. He simply existed in a way that made the group's obsession with intellect seem slightly ridiculous, like a reminder that kindness does not always need to come paired with sharpness in order to have value. Zach's history with Penny also carried a softer and sadder layer of meaning than that he felt like the version of an easier life she once could have chosen. Not too deep, not too complicated, but also lacking the growth she truly needed. Brian Thomas Smith kept Zach from falling into a one-dimensional stereotype through a very genuine warmth. By 2026, Brian Thomas Smith is 49 years old, and Zach remains one of the gentlest jokes the show ever created. Number 17. Artie Mann as Priya Koothrappali. Priya Koothrappali appeared like a sharp-edged kind of confidence, successful, intelligent, and completely uninterested in being impressed by the guy's quirky habits, as if she walked into the room with the calmness of someone who fully understood her own worth. Artie Mann, born on March 3, 1978, was already 32 years old when she first appeared, and what made this role important was the way Priya complicated Leonard's world in a very adult way. This was not a cute romance designed to reassure the audience about how it would end. It was a real relationship filled with power, ambition, distance, jealousy, cultural clashes, and the kinds of things that ultimately could not be compromised. Priya gave Leonard something that Penny, at that time, could not yet give him: polished confidence and a sense of intellectual equality. Artie Mann played Priya with a strength that never asked for permission, making her both a challenge for Leonard and a force that made the family and friendships around him far more complicated. Because of that, Priya was not simply a romantic obstacle, but also a test of maturity. By 2026, Artie Mann is 48 years old, and watching Priya again now feels like looking at the more realistic side of the show, where love is not only about emotion, but also about timing boundaries and the cost of choice. Number 18. Alice Amter as Mrs. Koothrappali. Mrs. Koothrappali carried the full weight of family expectations tradition, matchmaking, and the kind of maternal pressure that always disguises itself as love, as if every phone call from her was both a hug and a tightening rope around Raj's life. Alice Amter, born on May 11, 1966, was 41 years old when she first appeared in 2007. And what made this role important was that it showed Raj's loneliness was not just personal. It was also a story about family culture and a man struggling not only with his own insecurities, but with the blueprint for life his relatives wanted to force onto him. Her phone calls and demands sounded very funny. Yes, but beneath those laughs was a painfully familiar kind of pressure. Alice Amter played the role with remarkably precise comedic authority, making Mrs. Koothrappali overbearing without ever turning her into a monster. There was always a feeling that beneath all that control was real love, simply too suffocating to become gentle. In 2026, Alice Amter is 60 years old, and Mrs. Koothrappali still feels like one of the most familiar truths in sitcom history. Parents can love their children deeply and still become the loudest obstacle standing between them and the lives they want for themselves. Number 19. Sarah Gilbert as Leslie Winkle. Leslie Winkle was blunt truth in a lab coat, intelligent, sarcastic, and completely uninterested in protecting anyone's ego in the room. Sarah Gilbert, born on January 29, 1975, was already 32 years old when she first appeared, and what made the role important was how Leslie changed the group dynamic almost immediately. She was not impressed by Sheldon, not softened by Leonard's sensitivity, and did not care to participate in the boys' awkward social rituals either. That directness created a rare kind of sharp humor because it pierced male arrogance without needing to raise her voice or overplay the moment. Sarah Gilbert played Leslie with an extremely precise, dry confidence, making her feel more like a real scientist passing through a sitcom world than a character designed purely for comedy. Even with limited screen time, Leslie still left behind the feeling of a woman who refused to soften herself just to become easier to accept. By the year 2026, Sarah Gilbert is 51 years old, and watching Leslie again now still feels like seeing a character ahead of her time in those early seasons, sharp, confident, and powerful, precisely because she refused to pretend. Number 20. Pamela Adlon as Hallie Wolowitz. Hallie may not have taken up much screen time, but she changed the meaning of Howard's life, and that was the thing that mattered most. Pamela Adlon, born on July 9, 1966, began voicing Hallie in 2016, and even though the character existed mostly as a voice echoing from outside the frame, what Hallie brought into the series was far greater than the amount of time she appeared on screen. She marked the moment the characters stepped out of the world of dating, emotional awkwardness, and personal ambition to enter real family life. For Howard, Hallie was not just a child. She was a symbol of maturity, forcing a man, once defined by childishness, to learn how to carry responsibility for a life smaller and more fragile than himself. It was the storylines surrounding Hallie that revealed Howard's gentleness, fear, protective instinct, joy, and the very real exhaustion of being a father. Pamela Adlon became part of the warmth in the final years of the series, when the show quietly shifted from lost youth into the reality of building a family. By 2026, Pamela Adlon is 60 years old, and Hallie still feels like the soft closing note of the entire series, a symbol of what remains after the laughter. Love, responsibility, and a life that has finally grown up. Number 21. Melissa Rauch as Bernadette. Bernadette appeared petite and sweet, as if she had only come to soften the atmosphere, then over time revealed herself to be one of the fiercest forces in the entire show. Melissa Rauch, born on June 23, 1980, was only 29 years old when she joined the series in 2009, and what made this role so important was the way she turned contrast into strength. In Bernadette, a high-pitched voice came paired with a razor-sharp intellect, warmth came paired with pressure, and love came paired with very clear boundaries. She did not simply enter Howard's life to fix his terrible habits, but also forced him to grow up to live more responsibly toward other people and toward himself. It was not just love, but a demand to mature. Bernadette also brought a very modern perspective to the show. Love does not replace ambition. Motherhood does not erase identity, and career success remains an inseparable part of who she is. But behind that toughness were still flashes of vulnerability, the fear of being underestimated, and the exhaustion of someone constantly carrying too much. In 2026, Melissa Rauch is 46 years old, and Bernadette remains proof that strength can sometimes arrive very quietly, yet still be enough to make an entire room uneasy. Number 22. Simon Helberg as Howard Wolowitz. Howard Wolowitz began with swagger in neon-colored suits, excessive flirting, shameless showmanship, and a kind of humor that always tried to hide the insecurity moving beneath the surface. Simon Helberg was only 27 years old when he started the role in 2007, and what made his work so important was that Howard became one of the most transformed characters in the entire series. In the beginning, he was almost an explosive comedic performance, living through his voice gestures, oversized physical timing, and an energy that always wanted to take over the room. But over time, Helberg quietly redirected that character into a husband, a father, and a genuine friend, without losing the original comedic DNA. Unlike the PhD holding characters around him, Howard had to build his value through competence, loyalty, and the humility required to change. His relationship with Bernadette and the shadow of his unseen mother deepened the character in a deeply human way. Helberg preserved Howard's humor, but made it warmer and less desperate. By 2026, Simon Helberg is 46 years old, and Howard remains proof that the bravest transformation in a sitcom is not changing your appearance, but changing your personality. Perhaps that is why The Big Bang Theory still resonates with viewers after all these years. Not only because of the jokes, but because behind the laughter were loneliness, insecurity, and the desire to be understood. The cast has changed, and their lives have gone in many different directions, but the show is still there, like a familiar place we can always return to. If this video touched you, please hit like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment about the character you loved the most. The Cinema Nostalgia team truly thanks you for following and supporting us all this time. We wish you a good night, and we will see you again in the upcoming shows.